Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I will be explaining Blood on the Clock Tower. So first off, what is Blood on the Clock Tower? It is a social deduction game with the core principle being informed minority versus uninformed majority, and the win con is good wins if the demon is dead. So it's pretty simple. Like overall, it's a bit more complicated than that because how it's played is everyone is given a unique role, and depending on the player count, a certain amount of them will be evil or different role types. For example, if there are 8 people, then 5 of them are townsfolk, 1 of them is an outsider, 1 of them is a minion, 1 is a demon. I'll get to these character types later, but generally speaking, there's one person who is not accounted for in these 8 people is the storyteller, who is separately managing the game, which, you need a storyteller player and a bunch of non-storytelling players. The recommended amount to begin a game is 7. You can play games of up to about 15 players before it starts getting weird, and the smallest game you can do is 5 on Trouble Brewing, but it is very unbalanced at 5. 7's where it's 7 to about 15 is where it's balanced. For player wise, that's not including the storyteller. There are certain player amounts. For example, 7 players, there is 5 townsfolk, 1 minion, and 1 demon. No outsider with 7 players, but there is an outsider with 8 players, and so on and so forth. But right, how you set it up is that players are arranged in a circle, so that generally, like 7 players, you arrange them in a circle, and each player neighbours 2 players. So that's the players that are next to each player, that are all your neighbours. And the game has 2 phases. The night phase, where most characters, abilities and choices take place, and the day phase, where people can converse with each other to gather information and vote out other players. Some characters only act once on the first night and do not do anything after every other night. Others act on every night besides the first, and some just work every night. The way the day and night cycle works is that it normally starts off it goes night 1, day 1, night 2, day 2, and so on and so forth. The day is generally split into discussion phase and the voting phase, where discussion phase is where you talk, and the voting phase is where you can vote to execute players. For a vote to succeed in the execution, to execute someone, you need half of the amount of votes. For it to succeed is half of the amount of living players alive. So if you have, say, 6 living players, then 3 votes is needed, or if you have 7 living players, then 4 votes is needed to succeed. If you get the same amount of votes for 2 players, so that's a tie and no execution happens, and you need to get more than that tie to execute another player, or otherwise if it's still stuck on a tie, then no one's executed. So it's half of the living amount of players, and if tied, it's greater than the amount that it's been tied by to succeed in execution. And once a player is executed, the day ends immediately. However, dead players may also choose to vote, which it does not increase the amount of votes needed. But if dead players decide to vote, they can only vote once they're dead, and it's players can only vote once after their death, and after they used up that vote, then they can't vote anymore. Once a player's executed, the day ends, which I think I've just said. If a player dies, they can still speak with all players as if they're alive, but their ability will no longer work. There's some exceptions to that, but I don't think any of these. Actually, no, we've got a few of those. Technically, not really, but generally speaking, you won't have to worry about this. Not during this video too much. some characters gain information from dying, and death can be a way to clear yourself from being evil, because generally speaking, evil players don't want to die. And just one thing to remember is information trumps death. If you get voted out, don't be sore about it. You can still participate in the game. Just no ability, and you can still, because it is as much of it as a social game as the mechanical aspect. So don't worry yourself too much if you die. But, right, because you might get more information from being dead than being alive. Because you might wonder why you're dead, and suspect who would kill you and sort of stuff. And so, basically, for good to win, they need to kill the demon, and for the demon to win, or not the demon, but for the evil team to win, they need to survive till 2 players are left alive, and one of those 2 players is the demon. Most demons generally kill once per night, except for the first night, because the first night's more like setup night, so it will be unfair to just kill someone straight away. And there are 4 different character types. Technically there's 5, but I won't get into that 5th one until I'll get into that 5th one in a separate video, but for now there are 4 different character types. The townsfolk, which are good and have abilities that help the good team. Outsiders, who are good but have abilities that are detrimental to the good team. Minions, who are evil and have abilities to disrupt the good team. And demons, who are evil. Most of the time they choose a player to kill and disrupt the good team as well. And so that is the general gist of this. So today we're going to be going over Trouble Brewing and poisoning, the state and the poisoned state once we get to the poisoner. But generally, we're going through all the characters of Trouble Brewing script, which is a good beginner script for most players who get into the game. So right, first off we've got the 13 townsfolk, so first we've got a chef, which you start knowing how many pairs of evil players there are. In this script, it basically means if the evil players are next to each other or not. So if you have the 2 evil players are not next to each other, then that is a 0 for the chef. But if they are, that is a 1. But say you have like 2 minions next to each other, but 1 demon is not next to, or 2 evil players next to each other, out of the 3 that counts as a, let me just repeat that. If you have 3 evil players and 2 of them are next to each other, that is a 1 for the chef. If you have 3 evil players next to each other, that is a 2 for the chef, because there are 2, because those 3 players are all next to each other, which is 2 pairs next to each other. But another way a 3 also works is if there are 6 players, 6 evil players with, actually no, that which I doubt you'd have, but 2 of them are 2. It goes in like 2 gap 2 gap 2 for another way to get a 3. But generally, if or 2, no, a 2 is like 2 evil players and then another set of 2 evil players elsewhere. That's how you get a 2. Or you could have, like, it depends on how many evil players there are. You get the gist, which is very useful to know if the evil players are next to each other or not. And say if you get rid of 1 evil, you can get rid of another evil by executing the neighbours. And right, yeah, generally speaking, yeah, this is once like you start knowing Growl, so it's first night. Then we have the empath, which is to learn how many of your 2 alive neighbours are alive neighbours, which not players, alive neighbours are evil. So you normally neighbour 2 players. If you learn at a 0, none of your neighbours are evil. If you learn a 1, one of your neighbours are evil. If you learn a 2, both of your neighbours are evil. Normally your numbers, they either change or they don't change, but the storyteller will normally visit you each night to either keep giving you the same 0 or change your number to a 1 if there's an evil player next to you, or a 2 if there's 2 evil players. So keep an eye on when your numbers change based on who dies. If your number doesn't change and someone dies and one of your neighbours dies, then you know that the other person who was your neighbour is probably evil. So keep an eye on that. Then we have the fortune teller, which each night they choose 2 players. They learn if if either of the player they chose is a demon. So if they choose 2 players, one of them is a demon, they learn a yes. If neither of them is a demon, they learn a no. One good player always registers as the demon to the fortune teller. So this is their red herring. So they may choose 2 good players and get a yes, because one of those good players is their red herring, which will cause them to register as a demon to the fortune teller specifically, because it's a way to balance it out. So if you get a yes on someone, you might not know if they're the demon or your red herring, but it might be a good way to know who may be the demon, because there are only 2 people, or 3 if you want to get technical about it, but I'll get into that third player, but not including that third reason, but there are normally 2 players that you'll get a yes on. So you might want to choose 2 players if you get a yes, then keep that same player chosen, but choose a different second player, so that if you get a no, then you know the player you left out of the change of players you choose. So say you choose player 1 and player 2, you get a yes. You choose player 2 and player 3 and you get a no, then you know, since you choose player 2 for both of them, then you know that player 1 is probably either a demon or your red herring. But right, then we have the investigator, which you start knowing that one of 2 players is a particular minion. So say you have a minion character, and so you get given 2 players. So player 1, you get given. So for example, you get given player 1. Learn that player 1 and player 3 is a minion of this type. So for example, either player 1 or player 3 is the Scarlet Woman, which is a minion that I'll get to later. But you learn if one of those 2 players is a particular minion, which is very useful in weeding out the evil team. And if you kill one and then kill the other just to be safe, that is very useful, because that is a good way to help weed out evil. Then we have the librarian, which is similar with just not knowing that one or 2 players is, but it is a particular outsider instead of a minion. So you may learn that either player 4 or player 5 is the recluse, which is an outsider, and it will also let you know if and there's also a finger or if any are in play. So if there are no outsiders in play, then you learn that there are no outsiders in play. But if there is one, then you know that one of these 2 players, if there are 1 or more outsiders in play, you learn that one of 2 players is an outsider. However, if there are no outsiders, then you learn that there are no outsiders. So it's a good way to confirm whether you have outsiders or not, and to confirm whether, if you do, whether one of those 2 players is the outsider you're looking for. And next we have the mayor. If only 3 players are alive and no execution occurs, your team wins. If the demon tries to kill you at night, another player might die instead. So if it's the final day, which is normally when 3 players are alive during the daytime, and you decide not to execute anyone, then the team you're on wins. So, because normally speaking, if there are 3 players alive, none of them are the mayor, and you choose to sleep, then the demon will kill someone, and then it will just be 2. Then the demon will win. But if 3 players are alive during that day, you decide not to execute, the good team will win during that day, instead of having the demon kill at night. So that will end the game fair and win for the good team. Next, we have the monk. Oh yeah, no, wait, no, before we get to the monk, real quick, another thing with maze, it also, if the demon tries to kill you, the kill might bounce off to another player instead, which the storyteller may decide whether or not they want to do it. It depends on what position it will put the good team in, because the storyteller's main goal is to keep the game going to the final 3. which they may decide to kill the mayor if they believe that's the only way to get it down to the final 3, or if they may decide to keep them alive and instead kill someone else. It's mainly storyteller choice, but it's to keep the game going till the final 3, as that's the main goal of the storyteller. And also to make sure the storyteller generally wants to give the evil team a slight advantage as well. Not too big of an advantage, but a slight one. Next, we have the monk, which each night except the first, choose a player, not yourself. They are safe from the demon tonight. This basically protects whoever you choose from the abilities of the demon. So say they won't be able to die or be affected by any of the demon's effects. However, this does not protect you from minions, so minions may still be able to use their abilities on you if you're a monk protected, but the demon won't. Raven Keeper. If you die at night, you're awoken to choose a player. You learn their character. This is very powerful because you want to die to the demon, as that's the only thing that can kill you at night in this script. And so if you can try and bait the demon into killing you by claiming to be a very powerful role that doesn't want to die, and they'll target you. And so once you die in the night, you're woken up, and so say player 1 is the chef, the Raven Keeper is killed by the imp, and then they choose player 1 and learn that they are the chef, which is very useful, especially with late game where you are more likely to hit the demon if you choose an alive player. Next, we have the Slayer, which once per game during the day, they publicly choose a player. If they are the demon, they die. It's just simply during the day phase or nomination, if a discussion on nomination time, you can say, I claim to be the Slayer, and then say you shoot whoever you choose. Once you do this, that uses up your ability. If they are the demon, they die. If not, they don't die and the game continues, and you have used your ability and won't be able to use it again. Next we have the Soldier, which is you're safe from the demon. You're basically safe from any of the demon's effects or kills. You're not safe from minion effects though, so keep that in mind. Undertaker. Each night besides the first, you learn which character died by execution today, which say the Raven Keeper is killed by execution. Tonight you learn that a Raven Keeper was executed. Pretty simple, and if no one was executed, you don't learn anything. Next we have the Virgin. The first time you're nominated, if the nominator is a townsfolk, they are executed immediately. This may seem like a bad thing, but it is a good way to confirm whether or not someone is a townsfolk or not, and by extension good. Because say you are nominated by someone and they die, then that's a way to confirm them as a good townsfolk, because they will be executed immediately. The day might end, but you will know. It will confirm both of you as the Virgin and the other person as a good townsfolk. However, if either of the other character types nominate you, then that uses up that first time you're nominated thing, and every other time you're nominated, and it will be, they'll become suspicious, as they could be a good player, but there is another chance that they are evil as well. But right, every other time after that first time, though, the nominator won't die. And then finally for Trouble Brewing, we have the Washerwoman, which is you start knowing that one of two players is a particular townsfolk, similar to the Librarian and the Investigator, but with the townsfolk. Next, we have the Outsiders, whose abilities are detrimental to the good team. So we have the Butler. Each night choose a player, not yourself. Tomorrow, you may only vote if they are voting too. So basically, you choose a player each night. If that player doesn't vote on an execution, you cannot use your vote at all. And if they do vote, then you may use your vote if you want to when they vote. Next, we have the Drunk. You do not know you are the drunk. You think you are a townsfolk character, but are not. So basically, if you are the drunk, you will get told you are a townsfolk character instead, like the Raven Keeper or the Investigator, and you will be given information related to that role if it's an information role. If it's one that's not, then yeah, you get told basically stuff related to your role. So if you're an empath, you get told numbers each night, but most of the time they won't be correct numbers because you will not get correct information because you are the drunk. And if you're, say, the drunk soldier, you're not protected from the demon because you're not the soldier, but instead the drunk. So it's a way to have people second guess themselves of whether their ability really works or not, or if they're the drunk. Because the drunk is basically like, you get given a character, but you're not really that character, you're a character that doesn't work. And however, the drunk is given a unique character token compared to everyone else, as the demon doesn't get given a bluff role. That is what the drunk is. As if the drunk draws a character token, then that character token is not in play and is not given as a bluff to the demon, but the drunk thinks they are that character, and they are given information to persuade them that they are that character, but it's normally false information they are given. Though it's not, it may sometimes be true. Since it's an outsider role, it's whatever information you give them that is detrimental to the good team related to the role you give them that they think they are. So say an empath, say there are no evil players next to them, but you may give the drunk a 1 to make it seem like they are next to someone evil when they're not. But however, you may give them correct information if this is most detrimental to the good team, since the outsiders are meant to be a detriment. Next is the Recluse. You might register as evil and as a minion or demon even if dead. This role is very thingy because a Recluse, 2 good players can be next to an empath, and if the Recluse is one of those good players, then the empath may get a 1 instead of the 0, as the Recluse might register as evil. And if an investigator gets a minion in their may get the 2 good players in their ping, with one of them being the Recluse. So say they get the Scarlet Woman as either player 1 or player 4. Player 1 is a good townsfolk and player 4 is the Recluse. That may be because might be because the Recluse is registering as a minion, even though they're not. Same goes with the demon, so a Slayer may use their ability on a Recluse and the game won't end, because the Recluse registers as a demon for their ability to work, and so on and so forth. So it's a good way to mess with character abilities. However, the Recluse, you want to come out as the Recluse, it's only possible to explain any misinformation due to people choosing you. And finally, for the outsiders of a script, we have the Saint, which if you die by execution, your team loses. So if you get voted and you die by execution, you lose. It's simple as. Right. Next we have the minions. The thing I haven't mentioned is that minions are told who their demon are and also who their fellow minions are, but not what type of demon or minions they are. I mean, in the script there's only one type of demon in the script, but in other scripts there can be multiple, and so you generally don't tell them what demon types or minion types the fellow minions and demons are, but they will know who their evil team is. So out of these minions, we have the Baron. There are 2 extra outsiders and play plus 2 outsiders. So in a game with 8 players, you normally have 1 outsider, 5 townsfolk, 1 minion, and 1 demon. But if there's a Baron, then that'll be 3 townsfolk, 3 outsiders, 1 minion, 1 demon, with the minion being the Baron, because it increases the amount of outsiders in a game, which outsiders can be already a great detriment to the game, and this adds just more of them. So the Baron may add plus 2 outsiders, and so there could be 3 outsiders in an 8-player game, which, for example, the Butler, the Saint, and the Recluse. So a good way, but it is very easy to detect, because if you've had 3 outsiders and you've got a Saint and a Recluse, players claiming to be those 2 roles, then you know that someone may be a drunk. and it's a good way to figure out that there's a Baron in play, and also to figure out who's a drunk or not. Then we have the Spy, which is each night you see the Grimoire, you might register as good and as a townsfolk or outsider even if dead. So the Spy basically gets to see everyone's roles and what actions they take. So they're the only one who can see what their demons and fellow minions are. And they also see what each townsfolk are. So they are very powerful and can basically have like most information over everyone. And they might even get into, say, the washerwoman has this player one who is like player one who is the monk and player two is the spy, and gets that one of these two players is the Raven Keeper. That will be because the spy registered as a townsfolk in that ping. And yeah, this still happens in death. So right, very powerful. And yeah. And next we have the Scarlet Woman. If there are 5 or more players alive and the demon dies, you become the demon. It's basically a backup plan in case the demon dies too early. And then Scarlet Woman will just become the demon, and the game will continue. And once the Scarlet Woman becomes the demon, there will no longer be the Scarlet Woman, but instead a demon. Simple as. The game doesn't end if there's a Scarlet Woman and 5 or more players are alive and the demon dies. It's just they become the demon once the demon dies. And finally, for the minions, we have a poisoner. Each night choose a player. They are poisoned tonight and tomorrow during the day. So let me get into one of the player states in the script, in the game in general, but one of the only player states in the script. So poison basically means players with info roles may get false info and players with non-info abilities. Well, no, let me just repeat that. Poisoned means players with info roles may get false info, and players with non-info abilities just don't work at all. And players won't know that they are poisoned. So basically, an empath who will learn a 0 might get a 1 or a 2 if they are poisoned, because poison means you might get false info. Is whatever's detrimental to your team, but poison tends to last 1 night and 1 day from when it's applied. So the poisoner chooses a player. That player is poisoned for that night and for the day after that night, but not the night after that. They are healthy after that, which means they'll get correct info and their ability will work after that. If a player decides to use a once per game ability while poisoned, that counts as it being used, and they still get incorrect. They may get incorrect information from that being used, and if it's basically like the soldier, then their ability of being safe from the demon, or no, doesn't work, and so the demon can kill them if they're poisoned. Or a slayer, if they use their ability on the demon but are poisoned, that counts as their slayer shot being used, but the demon doesn't die since they are poisoned. And then finally we have the demon of a script. I put demons plural, but there's only just one in the script. So demons normally get 3 bluffs, which are roles not in play, and are told who their minions are. Not what type of minions they are, though. And so the demon of the script is the imp, which each night other than the first, they choose a player. That player dies. If the imp decides to kill themselves one night, a minion becomes the imp instead. So it's a good way to jump ship. If you're getting too much sus on you, you can choose to kill yourself one night, and then it will pass on to your minion. And this works for any player amount count. It's not like the Scarlet Woman, which only works with 5 play. Because the Scarlet Woman only works if the demon dies. It doesn't matter how the demon dies for the Scarlet Woman to work. With the imp, having imp past can work to any other minion. However, that minion will lose their minion ability and have the imps and will become the imp instead. However, if the imp nominates themselves and executes themselves, that doesn't count as the imp pass, so the imp will just die and they'll lose. An imp must choose themselves to die to pass their ability on to someone else. And right, that is all of Trouble Brewing and the base script explained. I will move on to the other two base scripts at some point after this, and then onto the experimental characters. But right, that is Trouble Brewing done. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time. Bye bye.